Minister, welcome to the program. It's so good to see you.
Thank you very much for having me.
I wanted to begin our conversation on the global outlook, first of all. Before we talk about what's happening in Saudi Arabia and what's happening in the region, are you positive that we are on track for what could be more growth globally in the year ahead, or do you feel that risks are skewed to the downside at this point?
I think globally we are seeing lower growth than what we have seen last decade. That said, there is growth, and we have seen the IMF recent report showing that actually there is going to be a decent growth, although it's not equal. In the US, I think, and emerging economies, the growth is quite robust. In other parts of the world, it's not as robust as one would wish. And there are a lot of factors for this. I think one of them is the lack of long-term planning and lack of long-term commitment to executing these plans. And you need leadership, and you need to make sure that people look beyond 1 year and 2 years and 4 years into a longer-term view of what really is good for that economy.
So again, positive, neutral, or negative on the global growth outlook?
I've always been positive, and I'm positive for 25.
So let's talk about what this means for Saudi Arabia as well. As I just mentioned, we've seen the IMF ticking down Saudi Arabia's GDP growth forecast for 2025. 3.3% is the figure that the IMF provides. How do you think that's going to impact the government's financing needs in the year ahead?
I'm glad actually you asked this, Dan. I think the whole vision, Saudi Vision 2030, is about dealing with these kinds of issues. Is actually moving the economy from an oil dependent, subject to this volatility of oil production, oil price, into a diversified economy. And over the last 8 years, a lot has been achieved in terms of diversifying the economy. Now, the non-oil GDP is about 52% of the total GDP. The non-oil revenues are quadrupled over the last 8 years, so that it provides us with this resilience in cases of shocks in the commodity price. The downgrade is related to the oil, but the non-oil, which is our focus, the non-oil GDP is actually robust. It is above 4.5%. Quarter 3 was about 4.2, 4.3%. So it's quite robust, and the likelihood in the foreseeable future is that we will continue that trend.
What we're also seeing is extended OPEC plus production cuts, and at the same time, President Trump's policy in the United States is to drill, baby, drill. That's probably going to mean more oil supply globally if the US can produce it, which would mean lower oil prices. So can Saudi Arabia still achieve its budget priorities if we saw a lower oil price environment moving forward, despite the advances that you've made on the non-oil GDP side?
I think the short answer is absolutely yes. The longer answer is, first of all, there is a limit to how much can be produced anywhere else in the world. Not only geography and ability to actually bump, but also price. Corporates will not be able to produce if oil prices goes below a certain level. And there is also a limited amount of production that can be made. So with oil demand as robust as it is this year and likely next year and the year after, I don't think there will be any significant negative impact. That said, as I said, the whole idea of what we are doing in our economy is actually to be prepared for shocks like this. And I am actually very confident that we will be able to execute our plans despite the volatility in the commodity prices.
Just on Trump, what impact do you see for Saudi Arabia and for the wider region as he returns to the White House?
I think overall it will be positive. We need leadership around the world who are visionary, who are looking for the longer term and planning for the longer term of their economy. I really believe that from what we have heard is that he is after de-escalating tensions, which is actually very good for the global economy. At the end of the day, I think whoever is in the White House they will be looking at what really matters for the people in the US, but also the impact of anything happening globally on the US economy. I am quite confident that the wisdom would prevail at the end.
You're a deep thinker, a strategic thinker on these issues. And when you look at what's happening in Saudi Arabia, you also focus in on what's happening on the region as well when you make your budget and financing decisions. So what's different about Trump 2.0 for the Middle East this time round, in your view?
I am not sure. I will not speculate what Mr. President is going to do or not do, but definitely an extra 4 years of experience in the White House will definitely inform the decisions. I strongly believe that we should give Mr. President significantly more credit than what people possibly are saying, and I think wisdom would prevail.
So let's watch and wait to see what he does. At the same time, what we have seen in the region is a very significant development only in the last few days, with the ceasefire finally being agreed between Israel and Hamas after 15 months of war. In the region, we've seen Israel waging war against Hamas in Gaza. We've also seen Israel waging war against Hezbollah in Lebanon. What's your message to international investors looking at our region at the moment when they see this instability? What can be done to improve the situation through the course of the year?
A lot can be done, and I can tell you it's very unfortunate that the ceasefire was as late as this week. We could have reached what we have reached now months before, but better late than never. And I think we should be hopeful that this will stand and continue, and we reach the next stage of a total end of hostilities. I think wars are very bad from a lot of angles, and not only for the nations that are involved, but also for the global at large. We should aim for de-escalation. Saudi Arabia strategically have made a very clear decision to de-escalate in the region, and we have seen what we have done over the last 4 years. And we are welcoming the development in Syria and Lebanon and Gaza, and will work with our international partners to make sure that this is a lasting development that will lead to a better region. From the private sector point of view, I think they are looking at the region with two lenses. There is part of the region is quite divided into two parts. One part that is actually flourishing and seeing significant development with bold, consistent, brave decisions to reform and consistent delivery and execution, and other parts that are really involved in a very struggled war, conflicts, internal conflicts, that we collectively in the international community are trying to actually bring about peace and prosperity. For that to happen, we need Saudi Arabia and others in the region to be strong, to be able to help them. We need to show a role model also that if you focus on your economy and your people, you will prosper. And that's what we are seeing actually now, that a lot of nations around us saying, if Saudi are able to do what they have done through these reforms, maybe we should start, and some of them have started.
Indeed, and if the ceasefire in the region holds, phase 3 of that agreement calls for the rebuild of Gaza. What role will Saudi Arabia play in the rebuild of Gaza, and how much are you willing to pay?
We play a very important role then in trying to bring peace and prosperity in the region. Obviously, if I want to be provocative, I would say we did not break it, so whoever broke it need to fix it. But no, that Saudi Arabia does not operate that way. The first priority is actually to look at the humanitarian side. And we have started actually contributing with our international community and sending the humanitarian needs and assistance to these regions that suffered badly over months and years. And the second part is making sure that before you send money and bring the world around to actually contribute into the reconstruction, you need to make sure that there are institutions in these countries that are able to do the right thing. You need to make sure that the governance of these countries is up to the task of actually rebuilding. There is no point of throwing good money after bad until you get comfortable and you get the multilateral institutions to help actually the new governments in these areas to build that institutional capability. Then we will think about reconstruction. And I think multilateral institutions, the World Bank, for example, started to think about what would it take for the reconstruction, and the friends of the countries in the region would provide the support needed.